Okay, everybody, welcome to our Lunch and Learn. Today's webinar is hosted by Slingshot Media, and they joined the FCA early in the year, in January, I believe. And today we are going to hear from Simon Corbett and a co-host, Rachel. And they are going to talk about a very interesting topic, I think, which I'm sure you'll all be very interested in, and it's the 7 sins of conventional thinking. Who would have thought that that would be a sin, conventional thinking? But
it's a sin.
The team at Slingshot are here to tell us exactly what that means. So without further ado, if you do have questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and we will read them out as we go along. Otherwise, there will be sort of 10, 15 minutes at the end of the Lunch and Learn for you to actually ask some Q&A questions. So over to Simon.
Thanks, Helen. Hello, everybody. There is lots of little faces and lots of little boxes, and you're all going to be disappearing in a moment because I'm going to share my screen, but it is very nice to see you. So I'm just going to attempt to do this. This is where I start getting stressed a little bit. Okay, that's good, I think.
Slideshow, Corbs. That's it.
Oh, hold on 1 second. Okay, thank you for Rachel speaking up. That's my co-host. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
And when I say everybody, I'm saying, Rachel, can you see that okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, fantastic. Look, thank you very much to everybody on the call for joining us on this lovely Wednesday. My name is Simon, as Helen mentioned. I'm one of the co-owners of Slingshot. Just a 5-second synopsis. We'd like to think one of the leading independent media agencies in the country. We do media strategy, planning and buying. So it's great to be here. We're also a member of the SCA, of course. And over the years as an agency and myself, I have worked with many franchise groups over the years, and we in fact do work with a couple of franchise groups today. So it's lovely to be talking to you all. And my co-host is Rachel Lonergan. Rach is our head of strategy. Rach has also got a lot of experience working on franchise business, so hopefully you'll get a little bit of a sense of that in the presentation today, this beautiful looking presentation. Now, okay, we are sure you are aware of the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. I mean, these 7 sins are behind about, I would say, 95% of all the Hollywood movies, and behind about 100% of all the lawsuits against white men in positions of power that you see popping up on the news every single day. So my understanding of the 7 sins is kind of avoiding them is a bit like a guide to life. If you avoid these sins, you'll be happy, you'll be successful, and you'll get to, you'll get to live in eternal bliss. But that's not always true, is it? As William Shakespeare says, some rise by sin and some fall by virtue. And look, it is good to be good, as Big Willie says, but I think if we're honest, sometimes being good and towing the line doesn't quite get you the result that you need. Sometimes, perhaps oftentimes, those people who bend the rules and do the unconventional thing can win big. And I think as people, we know that. Like, I think we've always known that.
Nature. Usually when we do a feasibility.
Oh, thank you. I think that we know this. I think that we've always known this, probably since being kids. Certainly for me, I can remember being at school and there were kids who bent the rules a little bit, coloured outside the lines a little bit, did things differently, and were generally kind of more unconventional. And absolutely, they reaped the rewards. I'm still friends with a lot of those kids right now, even after all these years. They have been very, very successful. So I think the truth is that taking the road less traveled can be more rewarding than taking the same path that everybody else takes. Yet we seem to forget that when we're at work. So in our personal life, I think most of us acknowledge that, being unconventional can help us win. But when we're at work, we're really resistant to bring that way of thinking to work. So this is from a study that was done in Cannes. It's called The State of Creativity. And as it says, basically, even in the creative industries, which, we think of as really brave industries, creative agencies and media agencies and production companies, etc. In this study, 90% of brands admit that they are too scared to take risks, even though they know that creatively brave brands generate 4 times higher profit margin than those who don't. So again, too often we choose to take the safe path, and unfortunately, in media and marketing terms, taking that same path can cause some issues. Ouch. This is from an Ipsos, a significant Ipsos research piece in 2023. 85 cents in every dollar is spent on advertising that no one will remember. Now, obviously, 85 cents is a horrible number to be faced with, but the reality is if you don't grab someone's attention, everything else is academic. Doesn't matter how good your product or service is, doesn't matter how good your promotion is, doesn't matter how good your service is. If no one actually notices the advertising, it's all academic. It all goes out the window. And right now, the majority of those in the media, advertising, and marketing community are investing almost all of their marketing efforts into advertising that no one will remember. Yikes. Indeed. And look, while, and I would suggest that, we all know how, if we're in the advertising and marketing department, we all know how hard we have to fight tooth and nail to get budget. I would suggest that if we're then wasting that marketing budget on advertising that no one remembers, that actually is a real sin. If we are not seeing the results that we need from our media and marketing, the trickle down effect is very problematic, as it says on this slide. It stifles innovation. If we're spending money in media and marketing and it's not doing well, the business loses its appetite for innovation. It is less likely to jump on the ideas that we might come up with. It limits growth, obviously. Growth in terms of revenue, growth in terms of resource, growth in terms, of course, of opportunity. You lose opportunities. If I go out and get a budget and I use that budget and nothing really happens with that money and there's no real success to show, I'm going to lose the opportunity to do that again. So a safe bet is not always a good bet, is it? So we are very proud to introduce our presentation to you today, which is the 7 sins of conventional thinking: repetition, wastage, obsession, triggering, theft, promiscuity, and risk. These 7 things that we've listed here are generally believed to be marketing and media sins. And I've been running this agency for 17 years now, dealt with pretty much every type of client in every type of category, big business, small, new, old, and generally these things are seen as sins. We believe that they aren't sins. In fact, we believe that they are virtues. And now I'm going to hand over to the holier than thou, Rachel, to begin the process of hopefully changing your mind too. Rachel is going to tell me when to move the slide on, because we tried sharing control and it didn't work.
It slowed down the presentation, so it just wasn't. It was more of a hindrance than a help. But I'm here to talk to you about repetition. So if you go to the next slide, please, Corbs, slide 12. So this is a quote from that well-known philosopher Bruce Springsteen. We tried to look at a few people who had some interesting things to talk about in regards to some of these subjects. And a lot of you would hear, and in some cases we will also tell you that, you know, you need to step out of your comfort zone and not do the same things over and over and over again. What Bruce Springsteen recognised is this, which is getting an audience is hard, sustaining an audience is hard. It demands a consistency of thought, of purpose, and of action over a long period of time. So what he's saying there is that he knows his audience, he knows what they want from him, and he knows that by being too different or by stepping outside and not kind of repeating the elements that have brought him success, in and of itself could actually be the thing that might hold him back in the future. So the reason we say this, and if we go to the next slide, please, Corbs, is this idea that repeating the same ad is boring. And there is a well-worn cliche in our world where we have this conversation with clients all the time where they've spent a lot of money on advertising, or they've spent a lot of money on a brand strategy, you know, a recognizable brand strategy. And maybe it's a couple of years down the track and they ask us, well, surely our customers are bored of this by now. Surely they're bored of what we're giving them. Surely they want something new. And in fact, this is a problem only for marketers and only for people in advertising. For consumers, it really doesn't ring true. And in fact, a company called Analytic Partners tested 51,000 ads to determine if they were worn out and if they needed to be renewed. And what they found looking at 51,232 ads is that 14 of them met the criteria for being worn out in the minds of consumers, whereas 51,218 of them didn't. So that tells you a lot about what consumers want from you and the consistency that they're looking for in order to recognize you and engage with you. And if you look at the next slide, slide 14, in fact, you see there that repetition and consistency is actually what builds memories. It helps your customers identify you. It helps you achieve preference. So familiarity is one of the biggest building blocks of driving preference, and consistency drives strategic reinforcement. So when you're building brand, you know, core brand values like trust and recognition, and you want to be the brand of choice, you want to be more likely to be recalled and chosen, ensuring that you remain consistent over time and that you're giving your customers those, you know, distinctive brand assets that they can kind of bring to the forefront of their memory to act on. That's really important. So repetition in this instance is not is actually not a sin. It may be conventional thinking to say that you need to kind of consistently switch things up, but we would like to challenge that. And if you go to slide 15, Corbs, the next slide, there's proof in the pudding for this. So there's some iconic brands that use repetition to enmesh with culture. So Lucky You're with Amy, that campaign started in 2002. So 24 years later, that Lucky You're with Amy is still resonating amongst audiences. And the Bunnings catchphrase of lowest prices are just the beginning, that's over 30 years old now. So if you think about how long that they've been using those distinctive brand assets to kind of set themselves apart in the market, you wouldn't argue that that repetition is causing problems. You'd argue that it's giving them distinctiveness in the marketplace, which drives brand salience and resonance. So I think Bunnings is either the #1 trusted brand or close to the #1 trusted brand right now. So obviously they're still getting a lot of value out of something that is 30 years old. So to wrap this section up, the next slide, Corbs, our scripture would be, don't make it difficult for consumers. So if you're constantly switching things up, you're constantly renewing, obviously there's value in being innovative, but don't throw what makes you distinctive and recognizable out in the pursuit of being different. And also understand where your brand resides in the consciousness of your consumer. People aren't waiting to hear from you. Does that make sense? So people aren't looking for your ads. You need to give them the tools so that they can easily recognize you and easily bring forth the memories that you've created with them over time. And, you know, be aware that emotion doesn't expire like a coupon. So memories are not time limited. We can constantly kind of pull them in and pull them back out of someone's kind of, you know, the back of their mind to the forefront of their mind. So lean into that and see repetition as a virtue and not a sin, which we consider it to be in terms of the conventional thinking.
Great. Thanks, Rach. Okay, I'd like to talk about wastage, media wastage, which is generally regarded to be a waste of money. In media terms, wastage has been a dirty word for a very long time now, but we need to rethink how we think about wastage, and we would like to give wastage a bit of a rebrand. This is a terrific line from the London Business School. The waste in advertising is the part that works. And there is much, much evidence that proves that waste can work. Waste can give you an advantage. And here is why. Okay. This is there's a lot going on this slide, but this basically is a slide that just illustrates what is called salience bias. And salience bias gives importance to brands that are seen as lot. Let me give you a really simple understanding of what salience bias is. The more familiar someone is with your brand, the more popular they think your brand is. The more popular they think you are, the better they think you are. Let me just say that one more time. The more familiar people are with your brand, the more popular those people think your brand is. The more popular they think you are, the better they think you are. That is, in essence, salience bias, and it is a proven cognitive bias that we have. Okay, so what we're saying here from a media perspective is, remember, not everyone in your category is in your category right now. We call it, as many of you may have heard, the 95-5, which is that the 100 people who are in your category to buy a new engage a new pool cleaning service or to try a new QSR franchise, 95 out of those 100 people are not actually looking for it right now. Only 5% of people are looking for it right now, but 95% of people will look for it at some point. So not everyone in your category is in your category right now. So you must talk to more people than just your target audience. That's what has impact. So people talk about wastage. We want to do a bit of a rebrand, as we said. So we'd like to rebrand it from wastage. Let's start calling it brand investment, or brand investment for the future. Because making sure that your media is not so targeted that you don't speak to anyone outside of your immediate category helps you raise awareness. It helps you raise consideration. And we believe strongly that your brand will see positive impacts from adopting this type of media stance. We're not talking about wasting huge amounts of money, but you do have to have some brand investment for the future to be able to build customers for the next day. And here's a couple of really good examples of this. Apple. Okay. Apple, obviously, we know what Apple does with consumer products, but let's be under no illusion. Apple price their product at premium users. Apple computers, like laptops, MacBooks, are not for everyone at all. They are mainly for people in the creative industries. Why are there ads everywhere? Why do they use cinema? And they do. Why do they still use linear TV? And they do. Why do they still use the Super Bowl? And they do. They do that to create brand envy. They do that to create social cachet. Because even when you are a brand that is really only focused on creatives, they want to be visible and they want to be aspirational. That's why they're spending that money. And here is a great example, Oatly. Oatly is a great example of someone who used salience bias, and I'll give you a real example of that. I had a cup of coffee with a friend about 5 weeks ago. My friend had a adventurous night before and was feeling a little bit worse for wear. And as we sat there and I looked at his pallid face, he said, I don't think I could drink any dairy. I can't bear the idea of creamy milk. He said, I might try one of these dairy alternatives. I looked at him and said, well, why don't you try Oatly, oat milk? Now, I don't drink Oatly oat milk. I have never drunk oat milk. I drink dairy. I would never buy Oatly oat milk. Why on earth am I recommending giving word of mouth to Oatly when I've never even used it? Because I see the advertising. I think they're really popular, which makes me think they're better and they should be the one for him to choose. Okay, it is something that is impossible to ignore, that this has an impact. So in terms of our scripture, always leave some budget for some halo advertising to build brand investment for the future. Be wary of over optimizing. Now, you can't really over optimize in North America and Europe because like the audience is just so massive. Like we have got a very finite audience here in this country. It's like 27 million people. So we've got to be careful of just not optimizing down to such a minute level that we ignore everybody else. And finally, you have to make sure that you learn every single campaign. And that means that you cannot just keep running exactly the same campaign every single time because you're just not learning anything else. Okay, I'm going to hand over to the amazing Rachel, who's going to be talking about obsessing about performance.
Okay, so just a quick definition on what performance means in this context. So we split our advertising campaigns really into two sections. There's brand marketing, where we're talking to kind of the upper funnel of our audience, the people that we're trying to make aware of us or consider us or have some kind of preference towards us. And then the performance end of the scale is really more about driving sales, leads, those kind of conversion metrics. And oftentimes, particularly when budgets are tight or when there's a difficult economy going on, we'll have conversations with clients where they'll say, I just need to drive sales. I just need to drive leads. And so any budget that might have been allocated towards the brand part of their marketing suddenly gets either taken out of off the ledger or it gets pushed into the performance end, which is all about that sales and leads kind of area. And we get it and we understand why. That is often the reaction to those kinds of conditions. Next slide, please, Corbs. But the truth is, now Mark Ritson is a marketing academic of some renown. He's got some very interesting YouTube videos and things like that online you can look at. But one of the things that he has said is you can't performance your way to brand success. So what he's saying there, you can't just push money into driving sales and leads to build your brand. Brand building is not optional, it's fundamental. So next slide, please. So this is a metric from earlier in the year, which showed that 42% of marketers plan to increase their performance budget, so that lower funnel marketing budget, while only 24% will increase their brand budget. However, we know, because we've seen this time and time and time again, and there are studies that go back to the 1980s, 1990s, that have validated that over time, that brands that push too much of their marketing budget into the performance end of the ledger will over time erode their brand equity. And then once you've eroded your brand equity, that then in turn begins to erode your performance. And once you've done that, it's really, really difficult to claw that back. So your brand has true value in helping generate leads and sales. If you just focus on leads and sales, you can't push it back up into the funnel. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's really what that chart's trying to tell you. We also know that brands that invest in awareness, so that upper funnel kind of activity, are much more efficient at achieving those leads and sales. So that's really, really important. So getting the balance right between how much you spend on brand and how much you spend on performance is something really worth thinking about, but we advocate a balance and not one or the other. Next slide, please. This is a real world example from Intrepid, which is a tourism business, as you probably know. So they do small guided tours in markets around the world. And they went from putting 90% of their budget into performance marketing, so lower funnel sales marketing. And they shifted their activity around so that it became a more even split. So then they put 50% into their performance marketing, and then they put 50% into brand. So really driving that kind of awareness and preference driving behavior at the brand level. And what they saw by doing that was a 41% increase in revenue and a 68% increase in bookings. So this is just one case study to show that putting all your money into performance, it might feel like the right thing to do in the short term. Nobody wants to sell less stuff, but when you look at how that nets out over time, you will end up eroding the brand and then ultimately sales. Now, there's not a one size fits all approach for this. So in marketing theory, there's an often quoted mix, which is you need to spend 60% on brand and 40% on performance. But it differs by the maturity of your brand, it differs by the maturity of your business, and also by the category of your business, because consumers interact with different categories differently. So it can take some experimentation to find the right mix so that you're optimizing your returns. So the scripture around this from us would be, if you invest in brand building, you will actually protect your margin, because businesses that invest in brand building can demand and achieve higher prices from your customer base, which delivers a higher margin for you. Understanding how your brand and performance relationship works is something worth spending quite a bit of time on, and really experimenting with the push and pull of those dynamics and making sure that you know what's going to work for you. And so we always advocate taking a test and learn approach to better understand the balance and how to apply that to your business. And that's something that we spend a lot of time with our clients and would love to talk to you about.
Awesome. Thank you, Rach. Okay, sin number 4, triggering audiences. It's interesting. Everyone at Slingshot said I should present this section because they said I'm really good at triggering people, which is a lovely thing to say, and it's nice to get some validation from everyone in my agency. Now, I am aware that triggering people is meant to be a bad thing, and in fact, in some instances, is a bad thing. But again, we think it's ready for a rebrand. We think it's not a sin, it's a virtue, and here is why. This is a great line from Samuel Beckett from his play written about 75 years ago. Vladimir, well, shall we go? Estragon, yes, let's go. They do not move. People's intention and actions rarely line up. We love to talk about what we're going to do, but the reality is that by and large, we talk and we don't act. And as Samuel Beckett said here in his play, like, people need a kick in the pants. Like, people often need a trigger to prompt them into action. Okay, I'm sure many of you will recognize this. This is the marketing funnel. Like, the marketing funnel was first created in 1898, if you can believe. This picture here was modeled in 1924. Now, just to be clear, as an agency, we still have love for the marketing funnel. It can work for many buying situations, many categories, many audiences. But I think what has changed is often we still think of it as a very linear, come in at the top of awareness, then you go down into interest or, consideration, then down into decision, which is kind of preference and action, and then into success, which is buying. Now, it can work in that way, but more often it doesn't. But interestingly, what a trigger can do, a trigger can work in a couple of ways. Firstly, it can still mean that someone works through the funnel in those ways, but they work through it really super quick. Or it can bring someone into the funnel at a very different entry point. So we want people to act, or we want to know if they're about to act. We want to find a trigger. And look, we need a trigger because the reality is we know that people have a lot more reasons not to act than act. It's called customer inertia. It is persistent. It's about, it's choice paralysis. It's, avoidance of friction, habitual convenience. All these things slow down people. 95% of buying decisions are unconscious. 61% of consumers stick with familiar brands. But the reality is, and this is what we think of, you know, as a media agency, at some point, someone who is not interested in your product or service becomes interested in your product and service in that moment. That means a trigger has happened. Something has changed from not interested right now to I'm interested right now. Our job is to try and understand that trigger. Here's a couple of good examples. Now, on the left-hand side, Snickers. Now, Snickers did a beautiful job on this by zooming in on the trigger around hunger. But they didn't say if you're hungry, you should have a Snickers, because obviously that is too generic and that is not specific to their brand. What they did is they said, if you are experiencing the feelings of I'm being short-tempered, I'm impatient, I'm grumpy, what that is not hunger, that's hangry. It's a subtle but a very powerful change. Saying to people, if you feel impatient, you feel grumpy, you feel short-tempered, you're not hungry, you're hangry. And because you're hangry, you need a Snickers. So there's such a strong correlation between if you feel this way, you need this product. And well, they launched this in 2010. By 2013, Snickers grew sales by 16% in the US alone. They are the #1 snack product in the world. Now, on the right-hand side, full disclosure, is actually a client of ours, which is Amgen, which is a pharmaceutical company. But I just wanted to talk about this for a second because that, again, this was a powerful trigger. We worked with Amgen to raise awareness for osteoporosis, and one of the triggers for osteoporosis is menopause. Now, from a media sense, obviously menopause is not something that you can necessarily go out and buy against. It's not as straightforward as just going on age, because there are many different ages when menopause kicks in. But we knew that it was a really important trigger for action, and we knew that we wanted to speak to people, women, of course, who may be experiencing that. So what we did to be able to identify that trigger in media is we went to use transactional targeting. So we went and spoke to Quantium, transactional targeting. But what we said to Quantium is, if we can use you and use your data to target people based on what they are buying, can we use you to target people based on what they have just stopped buying? And they looked at us quizzically and said, what do you mean? We said, we want to target women who have stopped buying feminine hygiene products in the last 12 to 24 months. So we actually are very proud to have created the very first reverse transactional targeting segment. We were the first people to target people based on what they had stopped buying. And we actually working with our creative agency partner, generated 50,000 more diagnosis of osteoporosis, and we won 2 Effies there, and that's the last time I brag, I promise. So triggers are not always obvious. So are you really clear? If you're sitting on this call, are you clear on the triggers for your category? Now, you know, some are really easy to understand. If you have a household renovation, that is a trigger for installing solar panels. If you are on school holiday, that is a trigger for nicotine replacement products. But interestingly, did you know that online gaming is a trigger for makeup and skincare products? Why? Well, because there's a large cohort of female gamers who watch themselves on screen all day, and that makes them consider their skincare regime. That's a less obvious trigger. You could create some more triggers. I'm going to just give you a tiny example of what I believe is the best trigger that has ever been created in the world. I don't know if anyone has spent any time in the UK or comes from the UK, but this is a box of Shreddies. Shreddies is a very boring, very traditional, very old-fashioned cube of wheat. It's like a wheat matrix, and Shreddies sales were declining at a rate of knots compared to all the really cool customers that were launching into that breakfast space. So they thought, we need to trigger people to reappraise our product. So they launched Diamond Shreddies, which obviously, of course, is exactly the same product. It was just a different box, and all they did is they showed a boring Shreddy turned on its edge to make it look like a diamond. Who the hell is going to fall for that? They saw a 17% increase in market share in month one. Genius. And the final thing in our scripture is think laterally about data sets. One thing that can really help with understanding your trigger is by layering other data on top of your data and to see what correlations or patterns might pop up. That might be a really interesting way to see if you can understand triggers a little better. And now I'll hand back to Rachel.
Okay, so one of the conventional ways of thinking would be that theft is a bad thing. So we want to let you know, and I'm sure some of you, particularly if you have retail environments, who are saying, no, theft is a really bad thing. We are going to suggest that in this context, it can have virtue. So a quote from Pablo Picasso, good artists copy, great artists steal. He might have even stolen that line, who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
But if you look at this little bell curve, what this is showing you is that sometimes stealing or repurposing ideas can be good practice. So if you're in a category where you are the market leader and you are driving the category, then you have less of an opportunity to steal ideas because you're the one setting the tone and setting the agenda for the category that you're in. However, if you are a category follower, maybe you're a brand that's come into a category that's already been established, maybe you're a challenger within that category, you have the opportunity to look at what has happened before to determine whether that will be successful for you or not. And there is also the case that not every customer out there is an early adopter. Not every customer wants to be the first one to try or the first one to buy. If you're following in the category, you have the opportunity to go for the laggards or the late majority, who are the bulk of customers, not necessarily the early majority or the early adopters, who may be the first ones into a category, but that may not necessarily be where your bread and butter resides. So in that context, you have the opportunity to steal or repurpose ideas that you know work because you've already seen the data from them working or not working for your larger competitors. Blue chip brands regularly steal ideas. If you look at Instagram is a brand that regularly steals ideas. Their entire market model currently is based around Reels, and they have stolen that effectively from TikTok. They've also stolen a lot of really great ideas from Snapchat and have made them their own. So they're a brand that regularly steals big consumer-facing ideas and then puts their own imprint on them. Anybody who has spent any time at Coles and Woolworths, you know very well that they swap and change access to ideas almost on a weekly basis. Like they're very good at following each other in terms of ideas. And even McCafe wouldn't exist if Starbucks hadn't come before them. So McCafe, as we all know, originated in Australia, but they really were created to stop the influx of Starbucks into this market. So it's not a bad thing to steal ideas. All the big brands do it. There's also a different way of thinking about stealing. So brands steal from culture, have the opportunity to join bigger conversations and grow 6 times faster. So I know we're up against time. So just quickly, this is an older example, but if we look at Nike really joined the social justice conversation and really kind of embedded themselves into that culture to kind of really grow their brand in a way that was really meaningful and is still resonates today. Ryanair is a brand, they're a discount airline based in Ireland, and they take great pride in being cheapskates. They take great pride in it. And then last year, 2024, they stole the cultural concept of Spotify's annual kind of Unwrapped series, and everybody shares their Spotify Unwrapped. And they stole that concept to kind of really deliver some really interesting Instagram content, which really resonated for them as well. But one example that's very recent that I wanted to talk about, next slides, please.
Yeah, well, Rachel, just Helen has very nicely reminded us that we have to finish at 1, so we're going to have to get back on.
Yep, understand. So this is an example from the US. So this is Garage Beer, which started as a Midwest beer brand in 2018. In 2024, they experienced a nearly 500% increase in revenue. What did that for them? The Kelsey brothers, who are household names in the US in particular because they're in NFL. And for those of you who have a Swiftie in the house, you may know that Travis Kelce is soon to marry Taylor Swift. They brought on the Kelsey brothers as investors and spokespeople. And in 1 year, that rocketed them to a nearly 500% increase in revenue. Last week, Travis Kelce chugged a beer at a basketball game. And it happened to be his own beer brand, which was not an accident. He said later he should have turned the beer can around so the brand was more visible. And that was estimated to have created a $9 million US dollar media value. So embedding yourself in culture, or finding ways to embed yourself in culture and stealing that value is something to really think about.
Great, thanks, Rach. Okay, I'm going to move forward really quickly.
Sure.
Okay, I'm just going to drop some truths right now. Most consumers are dirty dogs. They say they love us. They don't really love us. They'll just love anyone who happens to be in front of them at any given point. And you know, I think that the reality is that most of us know that you know, they just love the one that they're with. Now, most consumers are disloyal. We understand that. Famously, 72% of people who buy Coca-Cola will also buy Pepsi if that's only what is available. So we do have a tendency to overestimate how much people really think about their brands. However, the desire for consumers to play the field is actually something that we can use to our advantage. And one way that you can use that to your advantage is by partnering up with other brands, because that does give you something new to say. And for all those consumers out there who are kind of love the new and shiny things, you can manage to grab their attention. Now, I will say we've done a lot of partnership work at Slingshot, and full disclosure, it is a lot of effort. Okay, it is a lot of effort to get a partnership up and running and to get a partnership to work, but it is worth the effort. Huge increases in perception and fame, big increases in consideration, and also purchase intent. So yes, it takes a lot of time. It can be hard. But it is worth the effort. There's some amazing examples. Obviously, Spotify and Starbucks did a great partnership for many years because, hey, if you're sitting in Starbucks and you're just wasting time ordering coffee, you can listen to music. And hey, if you're listening to music and you're really enjoying it, you might sit around for longer. You might order another coffee. Interestingly, for us at Slingshot, we did the first ever commercial partnership with HelloFresh. We put little mini boxes of our client Sanitarium So Good soy milk into that, and that worked unbelievably well for them. So in terms of our scripture, look, partnerships are an integrated channel. Don't just think about the one thing that you're going to do. Think about all the lots of things you could do vertically integrated. Of course, it's got to be a win-win. That's not a revelation. But data is also a currency of partnerships. We use a lot of data to find out, you know, shared occasions, shared audiences that can unlock some really interesting partnerships. And then finally, over to you, Rach.
Risk. Okay. So risk would be a sin of conventional thinking. This is a quote from David Bowie. I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring. So next slide, please. Being risky is exciting, can also be good for business. So obviously emotional intensity and excitement, appealing to consumer desire for identity and authenticity, and increased brand differentiation. We'll just have to whiz through this, Corpse.
Yeah, that's fine.
Next slide. Challenger brands can take risks that established brands can't or won't. So especially if you're a challenger brand, you have kind of the opportunity to kind of do things that no one else has done and that nobody else would expect you to do.
Yeah.
So I think we'll go to the next slide. So these are iconic brands, particularly in the QSR space, that have taken playful risks. So some years ago, KFC famously ran out of chicken in the UK. So they created the FCK campaign as an apology. On the other side, you see something that you would never normally see in food marketing, which is a moldy Burger King burger. And they did that in response to, there were viral videos going around of McDonald's burgers that just don't go bad. And so Burger King showed our burgers do go bad because it's real food. So that is obviously a huge risk to show their food in that context, but it really paid off for them. This is an example of a small Australian brand, which is July, which is a suitcase brand, and they actually invited their social media followers to suggest ways that they should attack their products to demonstrate how resilient they are, and also to talk about their lifetime guarantee. So, they were driving over the suitcases, trying to crush them, and really demonstrating just how resilient and strong their suitcases are. So the scripture here is to lean into your unique strengths and personality, zig within the zag. So don't do the expected thing, and don't think of risk as all or nothing. It could be a social media play. It doesn't have to be every dollar that you're putting towards marketing, but really think about ways to do things differently that people wouldn't expect of you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rach. Look, we're just going to get to the last slide, which is we think there is a space there around creativity and high certainty, because creativity can deliver some certainty in terms of results. That is the end of our presentation. So lovely little revamp there of the 7 opportunities of unconventional thinking, because of course, if you obey all the rules, you miss all the fun. Thank you, Catherine. And that is it. Thank you. We're a tiny bit over time. Helen, thank you so much for that kick up the arse by text. I appreciated it, because I had taken my eye off the clock. I appreciated the boot up the bum. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Rachel. That was super interesting. And who would have thought that you could get through the 7 sins in 45 minutes as it was?
Almost.
So I'm sure we all got like a lot out of that. Of course, this is getting recorded. You'll get the recording. I'll also give you Simon, Rachel's details, so that you can connect with them and ask them lots and lots of questions, unless someone's got
we'd love that
major question.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Helen. Thank you for everyone.
Hold your peace.
Yeah, for those who stayed on the 3 minutes after.
That's all right.
I really appreciate it.
So next, Lunch and Learn is our hosts are Origin Energy. So they will be working on all things useful. So look forward to seeing you Wednesday, 24th of June on our Lunch and Learn next week. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your lunch breaks. Sorry it went a little bit over time, but it was super, super interesting.
It was Rachel's fault.
On that note, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much.